The rick house smells like it always has. Char and damp oak and 50 years of angels taking their share. I have my hand flat on the head of barrel number 1. 9 ricks up, back wall, third from the corner. I filled this barrel on the 3rd of November, 1976, the afternoon my daughter was born. I have never opened it. In 11 days, I am supposed to sign 19 acres and a limestone spring over to a young woman who is sleeping in my dead daughter's bedroom right now and calling me grandfather. She has the papers. She has the photographs. She has a laboratory report that says she is my blood. And she is lying. And I knew it in 4 seconds. And the thing that told me was a piece of wood. My name is Otis Kimbro. I am 73 years old, and I have spent 51 years making and filling white oak barrels in Marrowbone Creek, Kentucky. I am grateful you are here tonight. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there right now. And give this a like if you have ever been called a fool by your own family. An honest word before we start. This is fiction. Marrowbone Creek is not on any map. The distillery is invented, the people in it are invented, and the voice you are listening to is generated with artificial intelligence. Nobody is being accused of anything. But I want you to hear the shape of it anyway, because the shape is not invented. Somewhere tonight, an older man or an older woman is being handed a piece of paper by somebody they love and being told that signing it is what a good parent does. And somewhere tonight, one of them is going to sign it, because refusing feels like calling your own child a thief. That is the trap. It is not built out of forgery and lawyers. It is built out of shame. Stay with me, and I will show you exactly how it was built around me, with the dates and the barrel numbers and the dollar figures the way they actually happened. Now, let's begin. Marrowbone Creek has 1,900 people, 1 traffic light, and a distillery that has been running since 1891. Pelham and Sons. My father worked there. I started in the cooperage in 1975 at 22 years old, and I never left. I have raised barrels, set hoops, toasted heads, and gauged whiskey for 51 years. My wife Doreen has put up with me for 50 of them. She is 71. She still keeps the books for the church, and she is the only person in this story who never once made me doubt myself. We had 2 children. Dale is 47. He runs a barrel service outfit out of the old feed store, and he has a wife named Camille and a boy named Beckett, who is 16. And we had Charlotte. Charlotte was born on the 3rd of November, 1976. She has been dead since February of 2001. Or that is what I was told. And it turned out that what I was told was about half true, which is the most dangerous amount a thing can be. Here is the story I carried for 25 years. In the first week of February 2001, 11 barrels went out of Rickhouse D that had no business going anywhere. Bonded whiskey, federal paper on every one of them. They came off the ricks at night, and they were sold, and the money never came back. My daughter was 24, and she was working the gauging floor that winter, and she was the one who came to me and said she needed to talk. I did not let her talk. I want you to hear that clearly, because it is the sentence I have chewed on every night since. She stood in my kitchen on the 9th of February with her coat already on, and I told her I already knew, and that I was ashamed, and that she should go get herself right before she came back to my house. She looked at me for about 6 seconds. Then she went out the door. That was the last time I saw my daughter alive. 5 days later, on the 14th of February, her car went off Highway 63 outside Rolla, Missouri, and burned. They told us it was the fuel line. She was 24 years old, and she had a baby with her, a little girl born the previous August. A baby I had met exactly twice. There was a second set of remains in that car, and the county out there recorded it and closed the file. And that was the end of it. Doreen did not leave the house for 4 months, and I started doing the only thing I know how to do with grief, which is put it in oak. Every 3rd of November since 2001, I have filled 1 barrel and marked it with her initials and left it. 25 barrels now, 9 ricks up in the back of D, standing in a row next to barrel number 1, which was hers from the day she drew breath. Now, let me take you to the 14th of September of this year. A man named Royce Vandal came to my kitchen in a jacket that cost more than my truck. His outfit is called Vandal Creek Partners, and they have been buying limestone water in 3 counties since 2024. He put $6.4 million on my table for 19 acres and the spring that comes out of the hill behind my house. Kimbro Spring. It has run at 54 degrees since before there was a Kentucky. I told him no. I told him no in about 11 seconds. That night, Camille had us over and told 14 people at her table, in that soft voice people use when they are being kind at you, that Dad has gotten very sentimental lately and that Dale and she were watching it closely. My son sat there and said nothing. My son is very good at sitting there and saying nothing. I have learned since that it is not the same thing as being innocent. 9 days later, Camille called the house at 7 in the morning, and she was crying so hard that Doreen could not understand her. She had put her spit in a tube for one of those ancestry outfits in the spring, the way half the county has, and the account had pinged her a close match. Not a cousin, a close one. 24.8% shared. And when she went and looked at the profile, the account holder was a 26-year-old woman born in August of 2000, raised in foster care in southern Indiana, who had been searching for a Kentucky family her whole adult life. Her name was Junie Vale. Doreen sat down on the kitchen floor with the phone in her hand. 25 years I had believed that baby burned in that car in Missouri. And a laboratory in Utah had just put a number on my kitchen table that said somebody had gotten it wrong. She came on the 2nd of October, a Thursday, at 4 in the afternoon. I want to be fair to her because I did not know yet what I know now. She got out of a 14-year-old Corolla with a duffel bag, and she stood in the driveway and did not come any closer until somebody told her she could. Small, sunburned across the nose, hands that had worked. She had a way of holding her elbows that made her look like she was standing in a wind. Doreen crossed that gravel and put both arms around her, and my wife made a sound I had not heard out of her since 2001. And the girl stood there stiff for about 2 seconds, and then she folded. I watched my son watch it from the porch, and I remember thinking, that is a strange thing. Dale is not looking at her. He is looking at me. Over the next 4 days, they buried me in proof. The laboratory report with the seal, 24.8%, and a range of relationships printed right there on the page. Half-sibling, uncle, aunt, grandparent. A photograph of Charlotte at 19 next to a photograph of the girl at 19. And I will not pretend to you that it did not knock the wind out of me, because the jaw was there. The foster placement records out of Jeffersonville, a caseworker's letter. Dale had a folder for all of it, and he went through it slow at my kitchen table like a man reading a will. And Doreen was already gone. My wife was already calling her honey. And I sat there and felt the ground start to move. And I want you to understand that at that point, I believed it. I was 73 years old, and I believed that God had given me something back. Then, on the 6th of October, she gave me the keepsake. We were on the back porch. She said the caseworker had told her it was in the bag she came into the system with in August of 2001, and that she had carried it for 25 years. It was a slice of white oak stave, about 7 inches, cut across the grain, sanded smooth, a leather cord through a hole at the top. And burned into the face of it, in that shaky, loving hand people use with a wood pen, were 2 letters, C and K. Charlotte Kimbro. She put it in my palm and closed my fingers over it and said, "I think my mother made this for me." And Doreen made that sound again, and Camille was crying, and Dale was standing at the rail with his back to us, looking at the hill. I held that piece of oak for about 4 seconds. And I want to explain what 4 seconds is to a man who has spent 51 years with his hands on this exact material. I did not have to think. It is the same as you hearing your own front door open in the dark and knowing, before any thought arrives, whether that is your husband or not. First, the char. There was a scorch line on the inner face, and it was a number 4 alligator char, which Pelham did not run as standard until 2009. Second, the wood was quarter-sawn Missouri oak, and I know our staves, and this was cut from a barrel not older than about 15 years. And third, down in the corner of the inner face, small and gray and perfectly square, was a laser lot code. Pelham burned its lot marks with a steel die from 1891 until March of 2014, when the cooperage put in the laser. I set the code with my own hands the first year we ran it. That keepsake could not have existed in August of 2001. It could not have existed until at least 2014. 13 years after my daughter died. Here is where a lot of men lose everything, and I nearly did. Everything in me came up off that porch chair and wanted to hold that stave in the air and ask the girl in front of my wife where she got it. That would have finished me. Say it out loud right then, and here is what happens. Somebody has an answer ready. The caseworker misremembered. The foster family replaced it. The old one broke. My wife would have looked at me the way you look at a man being cruel to a stranger. And Camille had already told 14 people that Dad has gotten sentimental. That is how they were going to take my land. Not with a lawyer, with my own mouth. So I did what I do when a barrel is weeping and I cannot find the leak. You do not take the barrel apart. You chalk the hoops, you turn the light down, and you wait for the damp to show you where it is coming from. I closed my hand around that piece of oak. I let my eyes fill up, and that part was not acting. And I said, "Thank you, honey. I will keep this by the bed." For the next 3 weeks, I was the happiest old fool in Marrowbone Creek. I want you to know that I was good at it, and I want you to know that being good at it made me sick. I took her to the rick house. I showed her the 25 barrels with her mother's initials on the heads. I let her drive my truck. I let Doreen put her in Charlotte's room, and I said nothing about the quilt. And on the 17th of October, Dale laid a folder on my kitchen table at 8 in the evening and said that with everything the way it was, it would be smart to get the succession squared away, and that the simplest structure was to put the 19 acres and the spring into a family holding entity with Junie named as the successor interest. He said the word simplest 4 times. Camille said it would be what Charlotte would have wanted. I let my hands shake a little on the folder, and I said, "Set it for the 3rd of November, her birthday, in the rick house." Now, here is the part that nearly turned me around, and I need to be honest about it. That girl was not behaving like a confidence artist. She got up at 5 with me because she could not sleep. She learned the difference between a stave and a heading in one afternoon and never got it wrong again. When Doreen showed her Charlotte's high school pictures, she cried in a way you cannot manufacture, small and embarrassed, and turned away from the room. And twice, I caught her standing in the yard just looking at the house, like she was afraid it would be gone when she turned back around. That is not a woman running a play. That is a woman who thinks she has finally landed somewhere. Which left me with a piece of oak in my nightstand that could not exist, and a girl in my house who believed every word she was saying. Both of those things were true at once. And when two true things do not fit, it means there is a third thing you have not found yet. Let me stop right here, because we have come to the first door, and I want to know if you are still with me. In a few minutes, I am going to tell you who that young woman actually was. Before I do, put your guess in the comments. Type 1 if you think she was a hired actress running a con on a grieving old man. Type 2 if you think she was telling the truth and I was the one who was wrong. Type 3 if you think she was lying and telling the truth at the same time. I read them. It is how I know somebody out there is awake with me at this hour. And I will say it again plainly. This is a fictional story with a synthetic voice. So nobody needs your worry, only your attention. Put your number down and come on with me, because from here, everything I have told you starts changing shape. On the 20th of October, I drove 40 minutes to the cooperage with that stave in my coat pocket. I did not go in the front. I went to the lot yard and found Ruthie Mackin, who has been logging cooperage lots since she was 19, and who I taught to set a chime. I told her I had a barrel piece with a code I could not read without my glasses, which was a lie, and I handed it to her. She put it under the lamp for about 10 seconds and read it off flat. Lot 2014-0918, September of 2014. Then she turned it over and said, "That is our number 4 char, Otis. Who cut this up?" I told her I did not know. That was true, but I now had it in a second person's mouth and in her logbook, which meant it was no longer a 73-year-old man's opinion. That piece of oak had been a barrel in September of 2014, standing in a rickhouse, 13 years after the day it was supposed to have been given to a baby. So I started where anybody would start. Camille. She had opened the Ancestry account. She was the one who found the match. She had been at me for 2 years about the spring, about the acres, about how Beckett would need college money, and how it was a shame to sit on that kind of asset. She had told 14 people at her own dinner table that I was going soft. And when the money is that visible on somebody, you do not look much further. I spent 9 days on my daughter-in-law. I got into the household computer while she was at her Tuesday class. I looked at the Ancestry account. I looked at her bank. I went through her credit card statements in the desk drawer in the hall for the last 30 months, which is not a thing I am proud of, but I was past proud by then. What I found was ugly, and it was not what I was looking for. Camille had been talking to Vandal Creek Partners on her own since March. She had a spreadsheet with my 19 acres on it broken into parcels with dollar figures beside them. She had priced a house in Bowling Green. My daughter-in-law had absolutely been counting my land while I was still standing on it. And if you want to hate her for that, I will not argue with you. But there was nothing else. No payment to any young woman, no travel to Indiana. Her Ancestry account had been opened in April on a $59 spring promotion, and she had spat in that tube for the reason everybody does, which is to see if she was part Irish. She had found that match by pure accident. And 2 days later, I heard her on the phone in the garage, crying, saying, "I know, but it is real. The paper says it is real. And if I am wrong about her, I will never forgive myself." You do not say that to an empty garage if you are running the play. Which put me on Royce Vandal, and I will admit I wanted it to be him. $6.4 million is a motive you can hold in your hand. A man like that has the money to find a girl, coach a girl, put a laboratory report in front of a grieving family, and wait. He had been in my kitchen. He had looked at my hill the way a man looks at a horse he has already bought. For 4 days, I built the whole thing in my head, and it fit so well that I nearly stopped looking, which is the second time in this story I nearly stopped looking. Then I put the dates in a line, the way you do a gauging sheet, and the whole thing fell over. Vandal Creek Partners registered in this state in February of 2024. Royce Vandal first set foot in this county in the summer of that year. But the piece of oak in my nightstand was cut in September of 2014, and when I got Junie talking on the porch one evening, easy, just an old man asking about her life, she told me that the first letter had come to her in Jeffersonville in the spring of 2019. Somebody had been looking for that girl, and had found that girl, and had started writing to that girl 5 years before Royce Vandal ever heard the name Marrowbone Creek. Whatever this was, it did not start with the money. The money showed up late and got folded in, which meant somebody had been building this thing back when there was nothing at the end of it to steal. That reframe is the moment the floor came out from under me, and I sat in my truck behind the feed store for a long while with it. If it was not about the spring, then the spring was the story somebody told the others to get them to help. And that is a very particular kind of person. That is somebody with a private reason who found a public one to hand out. So I quit chasing money and started chasing the only other thing worth that much trouble, which is somebody keeping a lid on. And there was exactly one lid in my life. 11 barrels of bonded whiskey off the ricks of Rick House D in the first week of February 2001, and a 24-year-old girl who tried to tell me something in my kitchen while I stood there with my back turned, telling her I was ashamed of her. I called Inez Talavera on the 28th of October. She is 66. She spent 31 years as a field agent for the Federal Alcohol and Tobacco Bureau, and she and I have gauged whiskey across the same table since the Reagan administration. I told her I needed to see the 2001 transfer records for Rick House D. She reminded me that our local book from that year was destroyed in the flood in 2003, which everybody in this family has been telling me for 23 years. Then she said the sentence that ended all of it. She said, "Otis, you know we keep the other copy." Every barrel of bonded whiskey that moves in this country generates federal paper, and that paper does not live in your Rick House. It lives in a building in Ohio. The local book burned. The duplicate never did. And nobody in my family had thought about that in 25 years, because nobody in my family ever had to sign one. Second door, and this one matters more than the first. In a minute, I'm going to tell you who cut that piece of oak and burned my daughter's initials into it. Before I do, give me your guess. Type 1 if you think it was the buyer. Type 2 if you think it was my daughter-in-law. Type 3 if you think it was the girl herself. Type 4 if you have already worked out who I am about to name. And if you have, say so, because I did not work it out until I was standing in a building I had walked past 4,000 times. Same reminder, this is a fictional story, and the voice is synthetic, but the paperwork in it is the real kind, and it exists in the real world. Put your number in and stay close, because the next thing I tell you is the thing I would give my remaining years not to know. On the 30th of October, I went to my son's shop at the old feed store while he was in Louisville. I have a key. I have had a key since he opened it because I co-signed the note. It is a barrel service outfit, which means recoupering, rehooping, cutting down barrels for furniture people. There is a wall of scrap staves by the bandsaw, and I have walked past it 100 times. That morning, I went through it. 40 minutes in a coffee can on the shelf above the saw, I found a wood-burning pen with a fine tip. And in the drawer under it, wrapped in a shop rag, were 3 practice pieces. Same size, same sanding, same leather cord hole drilled at the top. On the first one, the letters C and K were crooked and too deep. On the second, they were better. On the third, they were exactly, precisely, the letters I had been keeping beside my bed for 24 days. The federal file came to Inez on the 1st of November, and she read it to me over the phone in her kitchen voice, slow, the way you would talk to somebody standing near an edge. 11 barrels. Removed from Rickhouse D, Rick 9, on the 7th of February 2001, on a transfer in bond that was never completed. And in the signature block, in handwriting I have seen on Christmas cards for 47 years, was D. Kimbro. Not C. Kimbro. D. My son was 21 years old in February of 2001. He was in debt to men in Lexington over something I still do not fully understand, and he took 11 barrels out of my rickhouse and let it land on his sister. And on the 9th of February, my daughter came to my kitchen with her coat on to tell me, and I put my hand up and told her I was ashamed of her. And she looked at me for 6 seconds and walked out my door and died 5 days later on a highway in Missouri. I sat down on Inez's step. I could not get air. And now the last piece, which I did not get from any file. I got it from arithmetic. If that young woman shared 24.8% with Camille's household, and Camille is not blood to me at all, then the match had never been to Camille. It had been to Beckett, my 16-year-old grandson who had spat in a tube the same week his mother did because he thought it was funny. 24.8% between two people that age is not grandparent. It is half-sibling. Junie Vale, born in August of 2000, raised in the system in southern Indiana, was not my daughter's child. She was my son's. He was 20 years old when she was made. He let her go into the state, and he never spoke her name once in 26 years. She was my granddaughter. Every bit of her was my granddaughter. Just not through the door they walked her in. I told her on the 2nd of November on the back porch, and it was the worst hour of my life. Worse than the phone call in 2001. She had been getting letters since the spring of 2019 from a man who signed them as a family friend who had known her mother. He sent her photographs of Charlotte. He told her about the barrels and the spring and the house. In 2024, he met her in person in a diner in Seymour and told her she had a grandmother who cried every year on the 3rd of November, and that the family would not survive being told straight, and that the kindest way was to let it come from a laboratory. He gave her the piece of oak in a paper bag and told her her mother had made it. She had carried a lie in her hand for 2 years and had no idea. When I finished, she said, "So none of it is mine?" And I said, "Honey, you have got the wrong half of it wrong. You are mine. It is the story that was borrowed." You are going to want to know why now, after 25 years, and the answer is that I did it to myself. In the spring of 2019, at a Sunday supper at this table, I told my family that when Charlotte's barrel turned 50, I was going to have the bureau come out and gauge it properly and bottle it and give it away in her name on her birthday, the 3rd of November, 2026. I said it 7 years early because that is how a Cooper thinks. And my son sat right there and heard an old man announce the exact date a federal agent would stand in front of Rick 9 of Rickhouse D with the movement records for that Rick in her hand. He had 7 years. He used 6 of them looking for a girl. He needed my land, and my barrels moved out of my name and into an entity he controlled before that gauging, so he could quietly cancel it, and the only signature I would never question was one I signed for Charlotte's child. I had 19 days from Ruthie Macon reading me that lot code to the 3rd of November, and I spent them being exactly the man they had described to 14 people at a dinner table. I let Dale explain the holding entity to me 3 separate times in a slow, loud voice. I misplaced my reading glasses in front of Camille. I let my son put his hand on my shoulder every single time. Inez Talavera filed the gauging request and the reconciliation on Rick 9. Marla Vint, who investigates for the Commonwealth's attorney, took the 3 practice staves, the lot log from Ruthie, the ancestry account, and the federal transfer file, and told me on the 29th that she had enough for the present-day charges and that the 2001 tax matter was too old to prosecute. I told her I did not need my son charged for 2001. I needed it read out loud in a room. The 3rd of November, 2 o'clock, Rickhouse D. If you have never been in one, picture a cathedral built out of oak and gravity, 9 ricks high, dirt floor, the whole building breathing whiskey. They set a folding table under Rick 9 because I asked for it there, and my son thought that was sentiment. Around it were Dale, Camille, Royce Vandal, and his attorney, a notary from Glasgow, Doreen, and Junie, in a dress Doreen had bought her. The folder was in the middle of the table with a pen laid across it, and I watched my son do the thing he has done in front of me at every funeral and every hospital bed since he was a boy. When grief comes into a room, Dale puts his palm flat on the nearest piece of wood and taps it twice with his wedding ring, and lets a short breath out through his nose. For 47 years, I read that as a man holding himself together. Standing under Rick 9 that afternoon, I finally understood what it actually was. He was sounding the barrel. He was checking the lid was still on. I picked up the pen. I want you to have that picture, because they all leaned in. Then I set it back down and I said, before I sign anything in front of my wife, I want one thing said out loud in this building. Dale, tell these people who signed the 11 barrels out of Rick 9 in February of 2001. He said, Dad, that is not. I said, say the name. And my son said his sister's name in front of 11 people, in the building it happened in, on her 50th birthday. The side door opened. Inez Talavera came in with the federal duplicate in a plastic sleeve and read the signature block out loud to the room. And behind her were Marla Vint and Sheriff Arliss Dunn and a deputy. Camille turned and looked at her husband, and I watched a marriage end standing up. Royce Vandal's attorney had his client out the door in under 90 seconds. And I climbed 9 ricks up that back wall with a bung puller, the way I have 4,000 times. And I opened barrel number 1 for the first time in 50 years, while my son was being read his rights below me. Here is the ending in numbers, because numbers do not negotiate. Dale Kimbro pleaded in April to criminal conspiracy, forgery of a deed instrument, and financial exploitation of an adult over 60, and took 6 years. The 2001 barrels were beyond the reach of any court, and always were. And that is the part I have to carry. Camille filed in February and got the house on bellwether and nothing of mine. Royce Vandal withdrew his offer in writing on the 4th of November, which I framed. The 19 acres and Kimbro Spring went into a conservation trust on the 9th of December, which means nobody in my bloodline can ever sell that water, including me, including her. Barrel number 1 gauged out at 107 proof and made 241 bottles. They went to the people who worked that rick house floor, 1 each, and the rest sold. And the money is a scholarship at the county high school in the name of Charlotte Kimbro, who did not steal anything from anybody. And my granddaughter, Junie Vale Kimbro, filed her name change on the 20th of January and sleeps in a room with a quilt her aunt made. I will not tell you I have peace with it, because I do not. Doreen has taken it harder than she lets on, and there are Sundays she sets 6 places. I visit my son once a month, and it is 90 minutes of 2 men looking at a table. And every single day I have to sit with the fact that on the 9th of February, 2001, my daughter stood in my kitchen with her coat already on and tried to speak. And I put my hand up. Nothing that happened after that was worse than that. A man built a 25-year lie on top of me, and it worked. And the reason it worked is that he knew exactly which sentence I had never let myself think about. That is what these things are made of. Not clever people. Just somebody who knows where you are already ashamed and builds their house on that spot. So let me say what I climbed 9 ricks to say, and I am saying it to those of you who are 50, 60, 70, 80. When somebody puts a folder in front of you and says the word simplest more than twice, stop. When your own family starts explaining you to other people in the third person while you are still in the chair, write down the date. And when proof comes at you with a seal on it, remember that a laboratory can only tell you that 2 people are related. It cannot tell you how, and it cannot tell you who wrote the story around it. The paper said yes, and the wood said no, and the wood was right. Because wood does not want anything from you. Trust the thing you have touched for 50 years over the thing somebody handed you on a Thursday. And do not ever let your shame pick which of your children you believe. That is the whole lesson. It cost me a daughter, and I got it 25 years late. If any part of this landed, put your story in the comments. Tell me about the folder somebody wanted you to sign, or the child you did not let finish a sentence, or the proof that turned out to be a costume. I read every one. Hit the like button, send this to somebody over 50 before somebody hands them a pen, and subscribe with the bell so the next one finds you. And one more time, plainly, so nobody is confused. This is fiction. Marrowbone Creek is not real. Otis Kimbro is not a real man, and this voice is generated with artificial intelligence. But bonded warehouse paper is real. Ancestry matches that get read wrong are real. And the quiet way a family can build a whole new person to put between you and your own name is very, very real. Chalk the hoops. Wait for the damp. Thank you for standing in this rickhouse with me tonight.